Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right, so Indianapolis today, Brandon Beane, Joe Brady. Which was more interesting of the two?
It's a good question. I don't think either of them had anything that was like super groundbreaking or interesting. I guess I would say Joe Brady, just because he's still newer to a lot of us. To hear him in this role, to hear him talk about the different things that are going into this role and being in defensive meetings for the first time. A lot of the Brandon Beane stuff is kind of the same stuff we've heard for many years. It's just in a different form. This is really the first time we've heard from Joe Brady in this type of setting because as he said many times, it's year one. That's like the theme of Joe Brady today. Year one. It's year one. And he was kind of sort of pressed on it a little bit, not necessarily in a negative way, guys, though, but well, basically, hey, it's year one for you, but when you say that, fans are thinking, wait a minute, what do you mean? We're not rebuilding here, and this team with the expectations, and he understood that from that standpoint. I think his basic point was that he tried to get across was, hey, everything is new. A lot of things are going to change. It's year one of me doing this here, but he understands the expectations that go along with him being in this role for the first year.
Yeah, we talked quite a bit about this in the last half an hour or so.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't think anyone. I want to make sure you hear me say this, and I want to say it again for everybody. Like, I don't think it's entirely fair. But I don't think anyone's going to give Joe Brady year one, right? It's you said it. Like, the idea here is to get over the proverbial playoff wall. So if that's the goal of the organization, if that's the impetus for making the change, you don't get any leeway for year one, like ramping up and like let's see how it goes kind of thing. Like the expectation is to go win 12 games again, I think.
And I agree. I think that's their expectation too. I think their standard is that they need to be at least back to where they were and further, because that is the reason that they made the change. But so I don't think he was coming in from a standpoint of it's year one of a program I'm building here. I think it was more of, hey, there's a lot of things different here. You guys had this same coach here for 9 years. There were a lot of things that happened that everybody's very familiar with. I mean, even so much so that like some of us media, colleagues, we were talking and thinking, for 9 years, we've had the same practice schedule. I would go out there on Wednesday for 9 years and see Sean McDermott in press conference at noon, and the Bills would practice at 12:30. I'd go on with you guys at 4 o'clock to talk about it. That might look different for all we know. This is year one of a totally different type of way of doing things. I think that's where Joe Brady wanted to land with that, because honestly, like, off to the side, we were all talking a little bit, and when he kind of found out that we were talking about the year one stuff, he even got a little like, well, I don't want it to sound like that. That's not really what I wanted to really come out from this. It's year one of him doing it, something totally different here that we've been used to.
I guess other than for our purposes with you, I don't really care when they practice. I just hope they wouldn't do a thing like the Sabres scheduling practice Sunday during the gold medal game. Hopefully Brady would be above doing that. But they had a 10:30 practice on Sunday. You don't get to a 10:30 practice at 10:30. And I found that astonishing. Okay, so are we into these kind of defensive meetings yet? Like, what's happened so far with, it being the offseason, Sal? What do we think or know that Brady has been up to in his first few weeks?
Yeah, he's been inside defensive meetings, and that's been a big change for him. He said, one of the things that's kind of happened along the way is he's never had to go inside defensive meetings and peek in. And the biggest reason he's doing it is because he wants to learn the language, as he said. He wants to learn what Jim Leonhard is teaching. What does the defensive scheme look like? What is Jim Leonhard teaching over there? He said, I think the way he put it was something like, I don't want to be, late in the game and the game's on the line and Jim Leonhard's talking about things that I don't know what's going on. He's calling a defense, but he basically said, like, I want Jim to be able to call the defense and do what he needs to do, but he wants to understand what's happening out there. And it's just so interesting for me to think of it that way, because I think what's happening here is, and you guys would probably agree with how this is sounding and even how it looked from the beginning. We all know Joe Brady's an offensive coach, and he's kind of just going to let the defense be run by Jim Leonhard. He's making it clear like that. He's saying he just wants to know what's happening there. He wants to be able to talk the language. This is not an area of expertise for him. But to his credit, he understands it's not an area of expertise for him. I've said many times, you could have coaches that come from offense or defense or special teams. A leader is a leader. It doesn't matter. You got to lead a bunch of men. Well, Joe Brady's got to lead everybody here. He's got to lead the 53-man roster. It doesn't matter what position you play, and he understands that. But he also understands his limitations, that he's not a guy that's going to be telling Jim Leonhard how they need to play on defense.
Yeah, no, so how much did we get as far as information on what kind of personnel they may need. I did see some reference, but I've not heard the entirety of the comments that were provided. But that maybe Brady feels like they've got more people internally left over on defense than maybe I've thought looking at their roster. What can you fill that out for us?
Yeah, and I think that too. I think he thinks it, and I think when you look at the roster, it doesn't have to be, and the other day I said overhaul, it doesn't have to be a complete change of personnel. I do think it will be a bit of an overhaul in how they approach defense, their philosophies, and you will have some guys that kind of have to fit into maybe a space where they didn't fit before. But, let's go back to what Jim Leonard said when he was introduced as the defensive coordinator, and I asked him specifically, hey, how much have defenses changed over the years since going from a straight 4-3 to a 3-4 versus now, and he used the word fluid. Everything's fluid now, and he's right. He said, yes, that's right. Like, you want positionless players. And I think that Joe Brady feels they have some positionless players. They have guys that can kind of fit different places around the board if they want to do that. It's not a straight 4-3. I'll give you one that was interesting today, though, and this comes from Brandon Beane, actually. I thought I got a good clue here. So he was asked, like this, Bulldog, he was asked the same kind of question about defensive personnel, right, and how these guys fit. Brandon Beane brought up a name that no one's really talked about. He said Javon Solomon. He said, when they drafted Javon Solomon, they thought maybe he was actually better suited for a 3-4 defensive end, but they really liked him, and, he plays 4-3. So now suddenly I'm thinking, what does this tell me? Javon Solomon's a part of this team next year, and they probably got some plans for Javon Solomon on this team. These are the things we're going to start to learn about some of these guys.
Well, I like the sound of that with Solomon as an idea. We talked a little bit last week, Sal, while you were away, about what styles of players. We were talking with Cody Carpentier one day. We talked to Chris Trapasso, who we'll do again tomorrow at 4 o'clock from Indy at the Combine, and how the Bills have mostly drafted. Solomon's the exception, right? Their edge guys have been Rousseau, Epinesa, even Bosa as a free agent. Miller's an exception, but the guys they've drafted are a certain type. Even Boogie Basham was a bigger, longer guy, right? And you've seen, I think, that position specifically has become less dependent on a body type, and it's mostly just explosion. How quickly can a guy win and get to the quarterback? And I mentioned Denver as an example with Benito. That's not a guy that's big and long. He's explosive, and Solomon is kind of that body type.
And I like Javon Solomon coming out of college, he was the guy that that draft class, when I would be asked, which guy are you excited about? That would be the first guy for me, because I believe that when you can get to the quarterback in college, you generally are able to do it at the NFL level. Maybe not to the elite status, but he was such a good pass rusher in college, and he went to a college where he broke a lot of records from other players that were there that were very good. And I think that he is the kind of guy, to me, that should be able to translate to getting to the quarterback. But yeah, maybe the scheme wasn't the best fit for him, and maybe now he'll be in a position where he can do that a little bit more. So we'll see. He was a guy last year, I think, that a lot of people felt, what is he really doing? Does he belong in this roster? Well, I think from Brandon Beane's answer today, he's going to be on this roster, and we'll see. And I agree with you 100%, Bulldog. They have kind of drafted the archetype, a certain archetype at defensive end. He is not specifically that archetype. Speaking of that, though, Brandon Beane was asked about nose tackle and, about Ed Oliver, and, that they feel that Ed Oliver can play. He can still play in this defense. It doesn't have to be a traditional nose of a big 300-pounder, obviously. He's not that guy. But those are guys that they have confidence, I think, back to your original point, they can still play in this defense, but it might not be in a traditional, this is what we thought a 3-4 would look like.
With Sal Capaccio, he's in Indianapolis. The NFL Combine is this week. Mike Schopp and the Bulldog here. Thanks for being with us today. So there's a Spencer Brown contract restructuring today. What are the effects?
The Bills save $10.4 million or so on a Spencer Brown restructure. So you move some of his roster bonus. I think it's he had a base salary and a roster bonus, so you could move that into a signing bonus. So now you can spread it out over the next several years. Remember, he just signed a contract extension last year, so there were more years to add, to spread it out for this year. It made it easier for a guy like that. He was always one of those kind of easier levers that they could pull, so that brings them very close to being cap compliant. However, I did ask Brandon Beane specifically, are you cap compliant now? He said they don't know the official number yet. There was a meeting today, as you guys know. there's so many different kinds of meetings going on with the league right now here, safety, health and safety, and then, financials. And he said there was a financial meeting basically with the league. He said they might have come up with a number, but he didn't know at the time. So he can't say for sure there, but the answer tells me they're pretty darn close if they're not under yet.
Okay.
What else? I'm sorry to jump around on you here like this, but defensive personnel-wise, I mentioned to Mike, we haven't talked about it on the air, but I saw a tweet from you about Teran Johnson and what his future might be, because that's a player, with the defensive changes here, with Jim Leonard taking over, how prominent is the nickel going to be, right? Do you want to maybe consider they do need a safety? And what did Beane say when that was posed to him today?
It's really good that you phrased it that way about how prominent will the nickel be, because Beane actually kind of said that himself in the answer. The question was, would Teran Johnson moving to safety be a consideration? This has been something people have talked about. I don't personally see it as a necessary fit, as a fit, but maybe it's a guy they don't really want to lose. They really love his skill set. You could have, remember, they do have Cam Lewis and Teran as a nickel and safety both. Now, Cam is a free agent, see with him, but my point is they like these guys with versatility. So maybe it's a guy you don't want to live with, cutting him his cap number. He's been so good for you. How do we figure it out? Then he brought up, Brandon Beane, about, he has played so much nickel. He's really been like a will linebacker over the last several years, because they don't use an extra linebacker. As you guys know, they use a nickel, and he's on the field so much that he's had to play like a linebacker, playing all those snaps in the box and taking a beating. And then he brought up maybe that's not the case anymore in Jim Leonard's defense, how many linebackers he wants to use. So that's a consideration to start talking about. Now, there's two things to consider there. Number one, you take a lot off Teran Johnson's body, which is great. But number two, you're paying him a lot of money then to be a part-time player, right? I mean, and that's something you don't necessarily want to do. So maybe how do you prolong the life of that, of a player you like? Well, is playing safety a consideration? Because right now it looks like Cole Bishop is really the guy. I don't know for sure they're going to cut Taylor Rapp. It feels like that's the case. But maybe Teran Johnson's a guy who could slot back there. And his answer was interesting to me, because he said nothing is off the table. He said he's a good football player, and after a couple of weeks with Jim Leonard, if that's what's best for the defense, they'll take a look at it. I still have my reservations that they would do something like that. But, hey, I understand. I mean, when you have a guy that you like, you don't want to move on from, he's not going to be on the field that much. He's making a lot of money. Maybe you find a way for him to be on the field more.
And you have a need. Yeah, I mean,
you have a need. That's exactly right.
They have the need.
And Bulldog, let me bring this up. He also talked about Cole Bishop, which, gone are the days of, as you guys know, there's no more free and strong safety like when we all grew up, right? We don't do that anymore. Nobody does that anymore. Safeties are very interchangeable these days. Now, not all safeties are super interchangeable. Sometimes you have guys who are just better in the box and guys are free. They view Cole Bishop as a very interchangeable part. Like, Cole Bishop can do different things. And I think from Brandon Beane's answer today, I think that gives them a lot of options of what they want to do at safety. They don't have to go look for a specific type of safety. If they feel like they can maybe if they feel Teran Johnson has a certain skill set that does translate to safety, you can live with it, because Cole Bishop can do the other part of that. They don't have to go, no, we need a more physical guy. We need a faster guy.
Right.
And I think that at least opens that possibility a little bit more.
And it would stand to reason that they would at least have some comfortability. You mentioned already, Beane said he is basically playing like nickel linebacker, playing near the line of scrimmage, right? I mean, provided you can trust him to get up to speed playing center field at times so that they can be interchangeable, because that's ideal, right? That's where you want to live, I think. I think almost any team would tell you that, because you don't want to limit Bishop to just playing center field either. Right? He's made plays up close to the line of scrimmage this past season as well as he was emerging. I'm always intrigued. I'm a sucker for, like, as much as I hate the, like, why don't we just make Rasmus Ristolainen into a winger conversation we used to have. They should have. With DBs, because Rod Woodson existed and played corner at an all-pro level, and then later in his career transitioned to playing safety, I just think like that feels. I remember bringing this up to you when Trey White was coming off the second injury. I was like, is there maybe a time to maybe consider putting him back there? Could he do that? So I'm always eager for that kind of development. So I'm entirely here for Teran Johnson, the possibility at least being on the table.
They have had discussions with Teran Johnson, about his role, his future. Jim Leonard's had discussions, and we'll see where that goes. They have a couple weeks left to figure a lot of this out. March 9th, obviously, is when you can start talking to players, but March 11th is when you have to be under the salary cap. And if you're going to do it, if you're going to move on from him, you're probably doing it then. Even if it's a post-June 1 cut, you would do it that time and save the money a little bit later. And if he's still on the roster after that time, sure, you could wind up moving on from him, but that probably gives you a little clue about, what they're thinking about Teran Johnson. There were a couple other updates. I asked Brandon Beane about injuries, guys recovering from injury. He said Tyler Bass, out of the three I'll give you, Tyler Bass, Landon Jackson, and Michael Hoyt. He said Tyler Bass is the closest to returning, but he didn't want to give a date on any of them. Now, Michael Hoyt posted something, I believe, on social media indicating something about July 1st. But that's from the player, right? The player is always going to be ambitious. Right. I totally get that. And that'd be great if he is. And, hey, July 1st pretty early. If he's ready by August 1st, I think it's good, to be honest with you. But he did say to me, Brandon Beane, that Tyler Bass is the closest of those three. And he's another guy that you look at his cap number and that he didn't kick last year, and it's kind of, you wonder kind of where he is right now. Landon Jackson's a guy in his second year. Where is his fit in this defense once he is healthy with what's going on? So there's a lot of things up in the air, and we know Michael Hoyt's a big part of what they want to do. He's gonna be a chess piece. They called him that today, but we'll see how healthy he is coming back. You also mentioned, by the way, Tre'Davious White. I asked about Tre'Davious White because of Max Harrison's injury. Tre'Davious White played really well last year. And, Brandon Beane obviously said they love Tre'Davious White. His year last year was a very good year. We'll see. They'll see where it goes with him. I wouldn't be stunned if they bring back Tre'Davious White. I just don't think you could do it for maybe $6 million they gave him last year, up to $8 million or something like that, knowing that they have Max Harrison now. And when he was on the field, he was very good last year.
I've got one more money question. No, Bulldog, they didn't need to turn Ristolainen into a winger. They needed to turn him into a Winnipeg Jet about 8 years ago. That's what they needed to do.
That's right.
That's where they got. That's where they went wrong.
Watch him. Watch what contender goes and gets him from Philadelphia. I've already seen reference to his performance in the Olympics has got teams interested in him as a trade deadline ad. Just saying.
They couldn't stop raving about him on NBC. They're just sort of typical, right? Sal, my last question is, so we were talking about Mike Evans earlier, and I don't know what kind of money that looks like ultimately. Huge, though, probably short term. If he ends up leaving Tampa, is there a level of contract? Let's leave the quarterbacks out of it because the Bills aren't going to dabble with Kyler Murray or somebody like that. Is there a level at which they're priced out because of their cap stuff, or is there no such thing?
If the right player is available, there's no level of being priced out. They will find a way to do it. There are always levers to pull. There are always guys that you could, release, whatever. If there's a guy they want that badly, they would find a way to be able to get him. If he, you could work out whatever it's compensation or whatever, obviously it could be a barrier, something like that for a trade. But free agency, that could happen. I do think, though, the Bills generally try to act, I think, responsibly in the fact of, and maybe too responsibly sometimes, which is why they don't have some of these elite players. I guess you could make the argument that they've needed over the last few years, which is they don't want to cripple themselves to be able to make moves maybe later in the year or the following year or something like that by maybe pulling some of those levers or by giving the guy too much money or whatever it is. So I think they could be priced out in that regard, Mike. But if it's a guy that they really want, the Bills will find a way to sign him. They did it with Joey Bosa. They did it with Von Miller. And they would find a way to do it.
Okay. Eager to hear tomorrow what tonight is like. And make sure, though, whatever you do, you can get to Starbucks in the morning in time to see if Ian Rappaport gets confronted again.
Was that Jordan Schultz last year? Is that what that was?
It was. Yeah, that is over at High Velocity. Remember, we talked about this last year, right? High Velocity is the meeting place. And that's over at the JW Marriott. And I'm sure tonight, after we have a bit of a media colleague dinner going on tonight, so a bunch of us who cover the team will be together tonight, and then maybe we'll make our way over to High Velocity and see if there's any action. And if not, maybe I'll stay overnight, sleep on one of the benches there, and see if something happens at the Starbucks there.
Right.
When I hear about something like that, my mind immediately goes to credit card roulette. But you don't need to do that because everybody's probably paid for, right? Everybody's on an expense account on this trip. All your media friends and yourself.
So is this going to be like shrimps the size of my fist? Then is that what tonight is?
Yeah.
So
last night was a bit like that. I went over to the famed St. Elmo's last night, and I got the shrimp cocktail. Now, I posted a picture on Instagram, and I'm telling you guys, the cocktail was so thick, it buried the shrimp. There were 3 huge pieces of shrimp. You couldn't see them. But the cocktail sauce was that kind of, it really cleans your sinuses, right? I mean, that's what they're famous for.
The best.
Now, tonight, right next door is called Harry and Izzy's. Harry and Izzy's is owned by the same company of St. Elmo. So the shrimp cocktail is also very, very good. And yes, it'll be like one of those nights. We'll get a little bit of that, and then I tell you guys, the steakhouses here are incredible, and that's basically a steakhouse, and you get a lot of good menus around here, I'd say.
Right.
Any limitation on what you can do? Can I ask you that? What is our company? Where does our company set the line for this?
Oh, there are limitations. Yes.
Really? I believe it. I believe
Sure.
it.
Hey, listen, I've done this before. Like I'll say right in the air. Like I've gone out and I've had more expensive dinners, but I try to be responsible for our company and people that that are willing to send me these things. And what I'll do is I'll say to the server, hey, could you give me 2 bills? I'll divide up, what I had, an appetizer or a couple drinks or something like that, just to make it more palpable.
Not put as much on the company. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'll put more on my own dime and say, look, I went out and I did this, and I'm not going to splurge like that. So yeah, I try to make it. My goal is to not come back and hand in a bunch of receipts and expenses to our bosses where they say you're not going next year. That's my goal.
That's completely
Smart.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Sal.
You got it, guys.
There you go. That's our dude Sal Capaccio live in Indianapolis. His report.